Great.
The stage is yours.
Thank you so much. Hello and welcome, everyone. Good morning if you're in the northern, in the U.S. or in North America, South America. Good afternoon if you're here in Europe, and good evening if you're in Asia. Hello and welcome to Blockchain Moves to the Public Sector. I'm going to be the host today, as mentioned by Daniel. Myself, I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Settlement. We've worked on a number of government-related initiatives, from voting in the 2019 presidential election in Indonesia to land registration use cases, digital identity and company identities, the Data for Common Purpose initiative at the World Economic Forum we're supporting, and also an initiative around subsidy and aid distribution that we did together with the Islamic Development Bank. So quite a lot of interesting experience. And throughout the week, we've heard got a lot of insights into, blockchain in supply chain and blockchain in pharma. There was sessions on DeFi and CBDC. And now I guess the question is, what about the government sector and what about the public sector? So I'm really excited to have Yngmo Johansson from the Ministry of Finance in Finland, Petrus Silgalvis, who's responsible for digital innovation and blockchain at the EU, and of course, last but not least, Andreas Hartel, who's the head of strategy covering AI, data economy, blockchain, and so forth at the German Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy. So welcome everyone, welcome to the panelists, and I would thanks for joining today for this exciting session to hear more about what's happening in the public sector. To kick it off, why don't we start with a round of introductions? So Andreas, could you maybe give us a bit more information, a few minutes to introduce yourself and your background?
Yeah, Matthew, thank you very much, and also to the European Blockchain Convention. Thank you very much for having me and for organizing this panel. I think it's a great opportunity to discuss how blockchain can improve the public sector. And the digital transformation as such. So as already said, I'm head of the division Artificial Intelligence, Data Economy, Blockchain within the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy. I'm located in the task force Artificial Intelligence and Digital Technologies. So next to artificial intelligence, all the strategic issues that go with it, regulatory issues. So we're currently preparing the AI regulation, where we are awaiting a proposal from the European Commission. I'm also in charge of the data economy and all that goes with that. And also blockchain, and the division I'm heading was one of the drafting units for the national blockchain strategy. I think we will talk about that later on. I already presented it at the previous European Blockchain Convention in September previous year. So I will not go again on that in much into depth. But yeah, I'm really happy to be here again. And thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks for that, Andres. Petrus, can we come over to you for an introduction?
Gladly. I'm Petrus Silgalvis. I'm head of unit for digital innovation and blockchain in the European Commission. I'm also co-chair of the European Commission's FinTech Task Force. I'm a lawyer by background. My doctorate is in law, so hopefully I understand relatively well the computer science and the technical specifications, but I'm coming from the legal side. And that also hints at a little bit our strategy, which started with a think tank, the EU Blockchain Observatory and Forum, which is the knowledge for us. We work with Andreas and the other member states in the European Blockchain Partnership of 29 countries, building the European Blockchain Services infrastructure. And then we come with complementary and targeted legislation, as well as working on technical standards and financing research, supporting startups, and with a investment fund for AI and blockchain.
Well, very broad scope of responsibilities, but I'm sure you have a lot of insights to share with the audience today. So over to you, Yngmo. Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Thanks for the invitation. I come from Ministry of Finance, where I work as a senior advisor in department which is responsible, among other things, for steering the public sector digitalization, funding and common e-government components, also like public sector EID portal and e-authorization services. I'm not a lawyer, not an economist. My background is from computer science. with blockchain scene, I have to say I wasn't there in the early days, but ever since 2016, I've been involved in various discussions. I would also like to point out that one of the activities we have had is the public sector blockchain network for experts in various agencies, which it has been ongoing ever since 2017, and it is actually now a Nordic network of experts. Since 2019, we had our first meeting in Stockholm, where Norway and Sweden was also participating as well. But that's maybe a short introduction of me.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Yngmo. All right. So with introductions out of the way, I'd like to start with the first question. And for this one, I'm going to pose the question we'll go around the same circle, Andreas to Petrus to Yngmo, to share views on the topic of blockchain is seen as a layer of trust and transparency. And in the context of the sector, how do you, in your opinion or in your view, how can DLT and blockchain optimize citizen trust in government? Would you like to share thoughts on that? Starting with you, Andreas.
Sure, thank you. So, I mean, it's very basic. Transparency and accountability are key in an open and democratic society for the public service. We're not here on our own. We have a mission for the society, for citizens, for the companies, and I think that a decentral and open source solution is in principle improving transparency and therefore accountability in public services. I think there is this promise we see in DLT and blockchain solutions to improve transparency and accountability that are very democratic, values to serve. And I think where, especially when it comes to public services, I see two major fields, not exhaustive, but maybe two major fields of application for blockchain technologies. One is registers, the other is identity. So, I mean, having a register is very typical for a public administration. I'm also in charge of open data. I'm currently implementing the Open Data Public Sector Information Directive into national law. We're currently in the legislative procedure. And, it's a very typical that public administrations have registers. And the other field of application I see for blockchain is identity. And this is also one of the larger fields of action we currently have in Germany to improve identities for citizens, but also, and this becomes more and more important also in the Internet of Things, that also things may need a secure identity in the network, in the Internet of Things. So with registers, maybe to raise a larger question. The thing is, at least in Germany, there are already lots of registers in place, and actually they work very good. And the big question is now, and I'm really someone who supports blockchain, but the big question is blockchain more efficient? Should I switch the register operation to blockchain just because there's blockchain? So what I think really is a decisive question is blockchain more efficient? Do I have any benefit in changing to blockchain? And maybe a third field of action would be notification, but I think this is not necessarily something for the public administration. In Germany, it's a mixed system. We have a private people, notaries. They're not really part of the public administration, but they are on the other hand too. But it's a mixed situation. But I think since we have, and Petrus mentioned the European Blockchain Partnership and the blockchain services infrastructure, since we have a use case for that, I think that I mean, we can see that also as maybe a field of action for the public service.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I got a question on the registries and why putting them on chain, or maybe a thought on that. But before, maybe I'll come back to that after going around the table here. So Petrus, I don't know if there are specific topics where you see in terms of how DLT and blockchain can optimize trust in the public sector. Do you have specific views you want to share on that one, or if there are specific areas?
Gladly. I mean, first of all, I think our approach is very much both to build, we move fast and make things ourselves, as well as we are trying to make sure that there is a conducive ecosystem for the private sector to innovate. So our actions work in these two directions. When we talk about our own public services, which is the purpose of the European Blockchain Services Infrastructure, a commentator from the other side of the Atlantic was saying in a panel that I was in that the blockchain technologies are the perfect fit for the multi-level governance of the European Union. And this is exactly the way that we do see, for instance, the European Blockchain Services Infrastructure, decentralized, not one database in Brussels, but on a spectrum of decentralized nodes in every member state, and probably in the future, nodes in regions, nodes in cities. So reflecting, again, the European institutions and the European project. And an important point to make here is sometimes there's, to my mind, a rather simplistic criticism of utilizing blockchain in public sector applications, and that, oh, it's government or between governments, everybody trusts each other. But actually, I mean, if you look at something like the United States on the other side of the Atlantic, you have a balance of powers, our own mechanisms in the European Union. We have, for instance, in legislation, the European Commission proposing, backed by the evidence of an impact assessment, the legislative proposals being debated and eventually adopted, if they're adopted, in the Parliament and the Council. And the whole system of EU law has preliminary rulings on EU legislation, secondary legislation, individuals able to put in their objection to a certain ruling by a European institution with the legitimacy being checked by courts. So blockchain actually fits nicely into this as well. But then my final point, agreeing completely with Andreas and underlining that I'm a believer in what sometimes people call the convergence stack, that blockchain is part of a system of, in the future, utilizing artificial intelligence, data from Internet of Things, and where blockchain can be a way to organize this data and where you need it to be made permanent and, immutable. Then it is, I think, a very nice tool, because even in a trusted environment, as we all know, things are verified, there's regular reporting, there's not usually blind trust, especially between economic actors or societal actors in a wider system.
Right. Thanks for that. And Yngmo, how about you? Do you have additional thoughts to add on the topic?
Yeah, I think much of things that I was thinking of was already covered, but I try. I'll start with the concept of trust, and it was also mentioned before that I think that the philosophy behind the original idea of the blockchain, it kind of like included the claim that you should not trust the governments and so on. And also there are also some ideas that the blockchain will enhance trust towards governments. But I think it's also worth mentioning that if there already exists a very good trust, like in the Nordic area, there is very profound trust on government doing good things for the citizens. So the trust layer question is not that relevant, I think. But the transparency angle is really interesting one, and that's really something that I think we will pursue in coming years. So having the possibility to assure that the government processes are transparent and we can kind of like prove that things happen in the right way. So that's really something worth studying. If I would point out some specific applications, I think most of them are inspired by the work done in European blockchain partnership, like the European self-sovereign identity framework, which I believe is really pioneering work, what has been doing there. And also the notarization use case previously mentioned is very, I mean, really significant work there as well. And the education sector, it's very inevitable that sector will have significant benefits or potential of using blockchain technologies. I know that, for example, in Finland there is they are planning to start a project that will utilize EPSI and micro-credentials, like between two countries. They are figuring out how to do this. So that's really interesting one. And then, of course, different kind of like proofs, like vaccination proofs, social security passport, and so on are really interesting ones. And last, I would like to mention, this is like something I have been personally very, very interested in is digital euro and the possibilities that lie behind that, especially on public sector services. I'm not talking about the money policy at the moment, but for the public sector services, digital euro may offer quite interesting possibilities.
Yeah. Right, so there's certainly no shortage of potential use cases, and maybe back to Andreas, you mentioned about the registries and everything works fine, and so if it's not broke, don't fix it, kind of a mindset. What I think that where blockchain can add something to this is there are a lot of not speaking to Germany in particular, but in different countries where you have government service 1, government service 2, government service 3, and they all have good registries and good digital processes. But from a citizen perspective, sometimes it's difficult to jump from one to the next. So I have to start one process at one and go to the next and go to the next in order to, for instance, buy a house. I don't know, maybe I have to talk to 3 different parts or get information from 3 different parts. So I'm wondering if there's, even though the systems are working great, sometimes it's potential to gain, provide information once or make a request once and be able to retrieve information at one time is maybe a potential benefit that can still come to economies and public services that are quite advanced already. But that was just my reflection when you mentioned that the digital services are quite strong, and I think that's common across Europe. There are a lot of other parts of the world where there's a lot of improvements still to be made, but we benefit from the digitalization and transformation that's happened in Europe, of course. And I just
Matthew, I agree, but please, the figures in Germany, with the history we have, with 2 totalitarian systems in 1 century. The German society is very, very, very aware of registries that can be combined. So by now, there's no single identifier for every citizen in Germany. So it is a bit programmed in Germany that, this link between registries are not, it is a heavy discussion in Germany, to put it this way.
Yeah. Okay, great. And I think there was one other use case that I was quite fond of in the land registration topic. I think it was Georgia who was putting all of their land registries on chain. And the reason that they were quite eager to do that is because it leads to a permanent and immutable record when you put it on chain. So they have a history as well of being ruled by a foreign country, and then being able to have, throughout time, irrespective of whether there's a foreign state that's taken over, the record will still be there down the road, which is one of the benefits I think that they saw to having the land records on chain as well. So the provenance and ownership is forever maintained. Great. Yeah, but it's great. And I'm going to move on in the question, but just one last thought. I think it was Ronald Reagan from the US that said, trust but verify as kind of the motto. And looking at what Yngmo said about having the transparency dimension, but to have the transparency, of course, you need to be able to verify. And that's, I think, the trust may not be the biggest issue, but to be able to have transparency, you need to be able to verify. So, very interesting stuff. I'm going to move on to a next question. And Yngmo, I see your image has dropped, but I hope you're still with us and can hear us. Are you there, Yngmo?
Yep, I'm here. Yep.
Perfect. So, Yngmo, I wanted to come back to you and looking at in the previous panel, we had a number of experts on the topic of digital identity and sovereign identity, to be more precise. So it's something that I think it's been mentioned by a number of panelists as well. And according to the self-sovereign identity, users should be able to create and control their own identity without relying on a centralized authority. Can you share your view on the potential of decentralized identities and how these can improve the quality of life for citizens?
Yeah, sure. There are a couple of views. Maybe I start with the eIDAS regulation because it is something that is now very interesting phase. So. It is anticipated that, and also the Commission proposed that there is a component that kind of includes the idea of self-sovereign identity, which at that context we are talking about these new trust service providers that could provide even identity attributes. I think. As we are now moving to the level that there will be a European, I hope there will be a European legislation on this, but there is also like national efforts ongoing. Here in Finland, there is very active discussion between public sector and private sector on how to implement self-sovereign identity, and we have at the moment multiple opinions what should be the role of government in this context. For example, how to provide the base identity into these new identity wallets is something that we are very much talking about. I think why it is so important, if I start to that angle as well, is the idea that we should have this European way of exchanging data, which should be human-centric, like not controlled by any central like the big platform provider from outside the Europe. So the human is in the center. That's very important angle. And I have heard many times this kind of metaphor of that this self-sovereign identity is like transforming the current post office model into the new model. Like in the post office model, you as a citizen, you ask from multiple agencies, please give me this and that information, and then you kind of pass it along to the party who needs that information. But with the self-sovereign identity, the post office model is no longer needed, and so you are actually sitting on top of that information, and that really I think enhances and empowers the citizen, and of course enhances this process overall.
Mm-hmm. Great. So thanks for that, Yngmo. And in order to those, what do you see as some challenges that need to be overcome in order to successfully roll out such a digital innovation and transformation?
Well, the challenges, of course, there are legal challenges, which are, I think, very, very difficult ones. like the status of these new digital identity wallet providers? What kind of status will they have, and what is needed for citizen in order to kind of like confirm that he is willing to use this kind of a new wallet? For example, here in Finland, we have a legislation that states that you are allowed to get any personal information from public sector agency, but the legislation does not say that it needs to be in electronic form, so it can be printed in paper as well. So and it doesn't state anything that how fast you should be able to give an answer back to the citizen. So it's not like fitting into this new world that the agency should be like, it should be mandatory for agencies to provide this information to digital wallet.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So I think there's a lot of initiative. I don't know, Petrus, if you had any thoughts on within the European blockchain service infrastructure, digital identity is of course a very common theme. And are there things being done at the level of EBSI that would support in the member countries to alleviate some of these challenges?
I mean, exactly. One of the use cases is self-sovereign identity. So it is one of the ones that we intend to deploy with the member states already by the end of this year. We're also coming forward with a new regulation on EU eID, extending the identification regime to the private sector. And one of the aspects will be the possibility to use self-sovereign identity. A little bit like in Finland, part of the discussion is having as the anchor a official formal ID, but how often do you use your passport or your formal ID, or how to say electronic formal state ID daily? Most of us not so much. Many of the credentials are other things, for perhaps reserving a tennis court or something to do with children's school activities, etc., where you don't necessarily, or just doing something on the internet where you don't necessarily need to be formally identified. So again, agreeing with our colleague from one of our, how to say, most advanced digital member states, Finland, it's really the imperative is to put the citizen at the center and for these tools to work with them. Sometimes you do need to identify people. You also do get the issues of, I don't know, hate crimes or something else on the internet, which is an issue that we face more and more. But ordinarily, you can allow people to remain not formally identified, but being able to use identity themselves and to give them a European option. Again, not forcing this on them, but we see some of the issues with huge data breaches that have taken place exactly in the identification aspect of a couple of large platforms. And it would be nice if there is a secure European alternative that citizens can use if they want to.
Yeah, and maybe I'm gonna ask you another question to follow on to that, Petrus. So there's we've heard, and of course Andres is from the German perspective in Finland, as Yngmo is sharing insights into, and there are also, I think every member country has a lot happening at with public services that are with blockchain, but it kind of, for people that are joining us from outside of Europe, it might sound a bit that we're creating kind of a fragmented system. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Is there do you see this leading to more fragmentation as the countries move ahead? And then how does the efforts at European Commission level combine with the member state level? Can you share some insights for people? I think many viewers in Europe probably can fit it together and understand how it works, but for others that are outside of Europe, how do the efforts of the European Commission with EBSI and so forth, how does that fit with the individual member state level initiatives that are taking place?
Well, a fundamental principle of the European Union is subsidiarity. So that which member states can do, which it is more efficient and better for the citizen to do at their level or even lower at a regional or local level, should be done there. Where we need to do something at the European level to prevent fragmentation of the single market, or for instance, to battle against climate change, then following the competences of the European Union Treaty, we do that at the European Union level. Having a European blockchain services infrastructure, which all the member states are building together with us and which is free for all the member states to use, is part of this landscape. Then, if member states wish to utilize some other blockchain application to do something locally or in the country where they think this better fits solely local conditions, and they don't need to do it with partners elsewhere in the EU, or where the citizens probably wouldn't need to port this to have portability of it to other countries. This is, of course, more than fine. This is their freedom and their possibility to target applications to the needs that are there. We do underline that EPSI is being built and is already there, so use it also basically for free. You have to build your own application, but also for things within your own country. But again, this is the freedom of the European Union. We are a set of sovereign member states that are pooling sovereignty in certain areas, but then have freedom to act nationally and also regionally and locally as appropriate.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Petrus. We see blockchain initiatives from China and from Europe and also from the US. So it's interesting to compare approaches and how they reflect the different, let's say, the way that the public service is organized. But I want to come back to you, Andreas, to look a little bit further into another role. So we've talked really, different applications, different regulations, and so forth that are taking place throughout Europe. But obviously another role that I think for the public service, and Petrus mentioned about the investment fund for AI and blockchain, but in order to see innovative technologies flourish in Europe and in Germany, it seems that government also has an important role to play in creating an ecosystem where innovation can flourish. And I think in Germany in particular, we see, in my view of what's happening, is a very good example. We see a lot of blockchain startups coming out of Germany. A lot in Berlin is a bit of a hotbed. And a lot more promising German companies in the blockchain space. So, can you share with us a little bit, the role of government has played in creating a conducive environment for such innovative companies to come up?
Thank you. Excellent question. First of all, I would like to underline that I think supporting startups is a general issue, not only based for blockchain startups, but it's a general issue. And so we have funding schemes, and many startups tell us that, especially in the early stages, the funding schemes are exhaustive. So that's for good startups or good ideas, I would say that we have money. For the later stages, when it comes to scaling up, maybe gaining a global footprint, there's a gap in financing, which especially is a gap in private venture capital compared to other regions of the world. What we also do is, help with networking. So what we're doing is, for instance, not now with the coronavirus, but organizing startup nights to matchmake, to facilitate matchmaking. We also have exist in the accelerator program where we, bring startups to, let's say, the Bay Area or Boston, Singapore, so that they can improve their business model and their technology there, where the hotspots, the global hotspots are. What I think still is something where we can get better is procurement. So trusting more in startups. I think the United States is much better there in, trusting startups. And to be honest, I think this is something that we could improve. I think what also is very important for this enabling infrastructure we have is that the importance of R&D and qualification, education. And I mean, Germany and Europe as whole, we are net talent exporters. We export our talent. And so we have many inventive people. And the big question is, why are they being inventive in Germany, in Europe? And I think it's because up to a certain stage, we have great cities, we have great regions, and it's just great to live here in Europe. And I think it's nothing to underestimate. And of course, our blockchain strategy, I think, was a very important signal to the blockchain community. Not only in Berlin, we also have great startups in Cologne, Hubert, for instance. They're working currently on this vaccination certification issue, or Helix ID, that are connected with EPSI, the SSI use case. So it's not only Berlin. We have great regions, as we have many great member states in Europe.
Yeah, thank you, Andreas. And Petrus, I'm going to come back to you because you mentioned in your introduction about I know that there's a mix of viewers today. A lot of the viewers are from industry and enterprise, and I think at least as many are from SMEs and aspiring companies that are in the blockchain space, so the real builders. Can you say a little bit more about the investment fund? Because I think that probably caught the ear of a lot of the people in the panel. I'm sure they're curious to hear more about the investment for AI and blockchain, that the fund you mentioned at the beginning.
I'm very, very glad to, because I mean, this is something Andreas mentioned as well. This is an analysis that many of us share. The startup ecosystem in Europe is very strong in talent. Actually, we have per capita even more startups than even Silicon Valley. At the early stages of financing with seed capital, we also look quite fine for the size of our economy and for our population. But it's at later growth stages where the venture capital is less prominent than, for instance, in Silicon Valley and in some other regions of the world. And this is something that we are aiming with some public intervention, which is also actually the history of venture capital, partially in the same United States, how it started. To strengthen it, especially for some of these deep tech areas, artificial intelligence and blockchain. So it was actually in my unit, we set up an artificial intelligence blockchain fund with an initial investment of 100 million euro, which has since been leveraged to 700 million euro and is being replenished in the upcoming budget, probably at a larger amount, including also implementation from the member states in the recovery and resilience facility plans, where they have the opportunity to use the fund like this. I think people will be hopefully happy to hear, and I am, that it's not us civil servants, bureaucrats who are making the choices. We're not picking champions. This goes out through the European Investment Fund and to active venture capitalists who can utilize this with, a few conditions, and the conditions are, fairly simple among them, that they should be invested in AI and blockchain, AI or blockchain, some combination of those three, because this is an area that we want to support in the European Union. And so again, it is in the market, and these are market participants who know enterprises and know the entrepreneurial culture, and who are also probably working with their invested capital, with their mentored organizations, with the enterprises, the startups. And we hope to also to strengthen this. And if you're interested in that, you can find information at the European Investment Fund webpage, or you can also contact me. But again, which I think is important to underline, because sometimes we get, which would be well-founded criticism for this, that it's not us, a policymaker in the European Commission picking it's this startup or that startup. It is really a set of decisions that are made on a commercial basis by active venture capitalists, experienced venture capitalists in the space.
Yeah, great. All right. Thanks for that, Petrus. And I'm looking, we had quite an active, while we were talking, there were a lot of questions from the audience. So I'd like to pick a couple of those if I can. And for the first one, I'm going to come back to you, Yngmo. So the comment is from, I'm sorry, I missed the name here, but that Finland is quite famous for the quality of education, and talking about projects in blockchain, but the individual, the participant did not catch the name. Would you be able to share more information about which projects you were referring to when you talked about education with blockchain?
Well, I know that the Ministry of Education has been an active member of this EPSI diplomas use case, and they have been working with that. And I also know that some agencies are working also with that, but I don't have like direct contact information, but I can look if you contact me by email. And one also interesting project is this micro-credentials project that I know is about to start in Tampere. University of Tampere is going to run this project, and I can also provide contact information to that project if you send me email.
All right, so please feel free to reach out to Yngmo, and he'll provide you more details. And I think there's just one more topic, and as we're getting close to the end, I'm going to put this one. It's maybe a controversial one in a way, but I think it's what a lot of people are wondering. And the comment was that what Europe is planning to achieve in 2 years, China has will deploy in the next 2 months. How can this be? That's the comment from one of the participants of the session. And but I think it begs another question, which maybe is linked to that, is how will the Chinese blockchain infrastructure interoperate with or work together with the European or with EBSI? But maybe Petrus, do you have a view on that? Like, do they compete? Does the China blockchain infrastructure compete with EBSI? Compete with what will come in the US? How do the two fit together?
Well, I mean, we're collaborators and we're competitors. We're market economies, at least definitely in Europe. So, I mean, we welcome foreign players who come in, of course, as long as they observe EU law, and we participate as well in international markets. I mean, obviously, a very interesting advance is the work that the Chinese colleagues are doing towards a digital yuan, which I heard about in the IMF FinTech Roundtable already almost 2 years ago when the deputy governor was announcing it there. We also have a set of working groups. I'm in several of them with the European Central Bank, the European Commission with the European Central Bank on the technical policy and legal issues of a digital euro. So probably on the international market, you could see a digital yuan and also a digital euro, which we think is also part of our monetary policy and our monetary sovereignty. But obviously the Chinese companies are active in Europe, are active investors and employers, and also globally countries that are buying blockchain products will look to the United States, will look to China, will look to the European Union, also other countries, Japan, etc. So yes, it is competition, it's collaboration, and it's going to be an interesting time ahead.
I think what you mentioned there, Petrus. We often say that blockchain is a team sport, and whether that's talking about an organization working within its ecosystem, or a country working with other countries, or regions working with other regions, I suppose the same holds true. Blockchain is a team sport. You compete, but you cooperate. So I think that's maybe a nice way to wrap up. I see Daniel has joined us, which tells me we've taken our time. So with that, I'd really like to thank you, Andreas and Yngmo and Petrus, for sharing your insights with the panelists. With the audience today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you.